My name is Drew Waldron, and I am on with internationally recognized astrodynamicist, educator, and space environmentalist Moriba Jah. Moriba, how are you today?
Aloha, my brother. Doing okay.
I'm excited to get into a conversation with you about your field because it is so inherently interesting. But before we get into space debris or space environmentalism, I just wanted to ask very simply, your focus on space environmentalism is fascinating, but taking a step back, what first led you to developing a career in astrodynamics, and what is your personal journey?
After I graduated from high school in Venezuela, I came back to the US and I enlisted in the US Air Force. And my job as an enlisted person was to be a security policeman, basically a missile cop, security guard. Having grown up in Caracas, I was never really exposed to a dark night, a dark sky. So Montana was like the first place that I'd ever been exposed to a dark sky. And I think that I recognized being under, a blanket of stars and planets in Montana, what our ancestors probably felt like. And sadly enough, most people on the globe today will never experience a dark sky. And I think that has a lot of consequences, but that's like a separate topic. But in any case, it's like at the missile silos, I'd see these dots of light go over the silos, and the dots of light were inexplicable to me because, they weren't planes, they weren't meteors. I'm like, what the hell is this thing? And every once in a while, some of these dots would disappear in the middle of the sky. And I thought, this is like a UFO or something. Like I couldn't explain what would be moving across the sky and then all of a sudden like disappear. So when I dug into it a little bit deeper, I came to find out that these things were human-made objects reflecting sunlight, and when they disappeared, it's because they were going behind Earth's shadow. They were being eclipsed by the Earth. And that was like so amazing to me that I'm like, I need to know more about this. And so astrodynamics is the science that studies motion of stuff in space.
And that led to your current work monitoring human-made objects. Now, when people think about environmentalism, the idea of space environmentalism doesn't tend to cross their mind, despite your work being so important. So what would you say to the average individual to explain the scale of debris in Earth's orbit right now?
I will say this, and people can go to like Google Wayfinder and space debris and they could see it on their own. But basically, we're tracking about 50 plus thousand objects ranging in size from cell phone all the way to the space station in different orbits. Out of about the 50,000 objects, maybe over 5,000 are working satellites that give us, position, navigation, timing, communications. Everything else is garbage. So it's like 90% of the trackable human stuff in orbit is trash. And this garbage is traveling at, many times the speed of a bullet, and at any point could collide with something that we care about and then render that useless. Just like as we've explored the land and it's been to the detriment of the land, we've explored the ocean, detriment to the ocean, and so on. We're doing that with space. And it's just becoming this like orbital landfill kind of equivalent, and it could get in the way and it could compromise the technology that we use on a daily basis and our ability to kind of get off the planet and do a space exploration.
When it comes to those collisions, does the idea or concept of Kessler syndrome play into your work at all? The idea that one collision creates hundreds or thousands of pieces of space junk, which could go on to create more and more and just exponentially add up?
The movie Gravity kind of like exaggerated it, and I always liked seeing Sandra Bullock and George Clooney, so that was kind of cool. But aside from that, that's an exaggerated thing. But really, I think the concept that would be better for people to understand is that just like with any finite plot of land or even highways, there's a certain carrying capacity that these things have, the ability for us to be able to use the resource sustainably and in perpetuity. And the trash at this point in space is becoming so numerous, it's getting in the way of us being able to utilize space for things that benefit us, like looking back towards the Earth, monitoring for disasters, climate change, and all this other stuff. So we're losing our ability to actually use space to our benefit. And I think that's the takeaway for folks.
Well, it breaks my heart that Hollywood is apparently over-exaggerating. As an expert in this field, what solutions do you think are humanity's best step forward?
Well, one of the things that I'm really an advocate for and I'm proposing is that governments should really move boldly to develop circular economies in space. So right now, linear economy, when it comes to waste management, is what we have in space, meaning everything that we launch is destined to become garbage. Just like we have single-use plastics All of our satellites are single-use satellites. So it's like you launch the thing, it works for a few years, hopefully it dies, it stays in orbit for a very long time. And depending on how far away it is, I mean, some altitudes, it's kind of like forever. It never comes back. So we just keep on launching more and more single-use satellites. A circular economy in waste management is about preventing pollution through prioritizing reuse and recyclability. So I think that we should be designing and launching reusable and recyclable satellites. We have reusable rockets with SpaceX and Elon Musk. We don't have reusable and recyclable satellites. And so that's one of the things that we need to do and try to minimize single-use satellites. So I think that's one of the solutions.
Absolutely. If we could pivot to a bit more of a personal question, I think something that has always fascinated me about some interviews I've heard with you is the role that spirituality plays into your scientific work. I've heard you speak in interviews about how your work is driven by a, quote, forgotten interconnectedness amongst all things in the universe. How does your spirituality play into your work in science?
I will say that these things are inextricably linked and interwoven. They're one and the same. When I was in military school, it was a boarding school in Venezuela, and I went through some extremely traumatic events. And at the age of 16, I went through this experience in the military school where I was locked up for 3 months. They didn't let me go home. It was horrible. It was like from the moment I woke up, I was being hazed and doing all sorts of weird stuff. I'd go to class and there would be somebody waiting for me outside my classroom. As soon as I walked out, it would be more crawling through this, that, or the other and all sorts of things. I lost the will to live. I didn't want to live anymore. And I think in that space where I hit rock bottom, something really fascinating and unexpected happened. I feel that in this void of nothingness, I experienced what would otherwise be called like an ocean of love and compassion. And I didn't expect that. And it felt like this underlying fabric to all of existence. That is kind of what I got in touch with or experienced in this void. And I came out of that experience feeling that I had two choices. One, I could either respond to my experiences with equal anger and all these other things, which I had a lot of reason to, or I could try to heal my traumas and make my traumas be of service to other people and try to come from a place of love and compassion. And so, yes, my belief and the evidence that I see around me is that all things are interconnected. And I very much embrace this kind of intergenerational contract of stewardship with the planet. I feel that we're here to be caretakers and stewards. And at the end of the day, nobody really owns anything. Time erases all things. Eventually, weather erases cars, houses, erosion claims, properties. So I think ownership is really a societal illusion. And many indigenous people don't embrace that at all. They believe in stewardship. So absolutely, spirituality is the underlying fabric. I'm very ceremonious. I open up my days, some chants. I say some mantras. I light some incense. I try to approach life with the belief in the sacredness of all things. I try to basically approach things with a sense of sacredness. And I want to be an instrument of consciousness shift towards stewardship and interconnectedness and empathy.
Wow, I think that's incredible how you were able to take such a negative experience in your childhood and transform it into this belief of stewardship. I especially like that because I feel like most people today don't believe that spirituality and science could mix, but it seems like you have had an incredible experience mixing the two together. If we could jump to talking about how you lead your team, you are leading a team in a field that is so deeply complex, where you are very often making decisions in chaotic situations. What is your personal leadership philosophy? And what do you think that others should take away from how you guide your team?
First and foremost, the first thing that I recognize is that I'm not all-knowing and I'm very ignorant of many things. And I like to empower others to be the best versions of themselves. They're good ideas that come from everywhere in all walks of life. People don't have to have 3 letters behind their name and having gone to specific schools or educational institutions to be smart and intelligent. I think that inherently we are smart and intelligent. So I like being very inclusive. And when it comes to decision making, I like opening up to getting input and everybody's perspective into things. And I like when people can achieve harmony. We're not gonna achieve equality. Everybody's not gonna think the same, but we can come together and basically attune and achieve harmony. And the other thing too is that because I accept my ignorance, I open myself to be surprised. And so surprise is the difference between what we observe and what we predict. If we predict exactly what we observe, then we're unsurprised, but rarely does that happen. And so surprise is the basis of learning. And I'm in a constant aspect of learning because I realize that everything is dynamic and everything is changing. And I want to continue to refine the way that I make decisions. So yeah, I think the way that I really lead is to empower the people on the team and the people that I work with. And I try to make it more of a round, knights at the round table sort of stuff instead of this hierarchy. And I, want to basically let people know, hey, you have good ideas and I want to hear them, and don't be shy about these things. I really like critical thinking. So the people that I work with, if it's somebody that I have to tell and just be prescriptive, do this, do that, I don't really have use for that. I don't work well with people where I have to prescribe every step. I want people to come with it with their own power, their own knowingness, and for us to come together and achieve something kind of in that togetherness.
I love that. A culture of self-sufficiency. Moriba, it was fantastic talking to you, having a conversation about your work. I always like to end these interviews asking what advice you have for young people. And we get all sorts of advice from people in different fields. So from the world of astrodynamics, for any young person pursuing a career in such a complex field, what advice do you have for young people?
Yeah, I would say this. You don't have to earn your place in the world. It's already yours. You have a place in the world. Just the fact that you exist. So don't buy into this narrative that you're not worthy, that you have to do all these, things, this, that, or the other. Just focus on what brings you joy. May your joy not come from the misery of other people. I beg of you for that. And, don't let the opinions of others become your reality. All through my career, many people had opinions of what I should be or what I should do, and they would project that stuff on me. And I finally said, this is your thing. This is not mine. I don't accept your energy and I don't accept your opinions. I'm going to be a sovereign person and make my own choices, and I'm going to hold myself accountable for the choices that I make. So I think those would be the things that I would pass on to young people.
That is a beautiful sentiment. Listeners, that will conclude our conversation with Moriba Jah. Moriba, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Much love and aloha, my brother.